Commander Veltanos pressed his six-fingered hand against the cold metal of the observation deck. His reptilian eyes, evolved to see across multiple light spectrums, studied the small blue world spinning peacefully below. Behind him, the bridge of his massive dreadnought hummed with activity as thousands of crew members prepared for what should be the easiest conquest in Corvathian history. The view screen displayed tactical data that would make any military commander smile. 50,000 warships formed a perfect sphere around Earth's solar system. Each vessel bristled with plasma cannons capable of turning continents into glass. The smallest destroyer in his fleet could obliterate entire cities with a single salvo. His flagship alone carried enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Veltanos had conquered 17 star systems using this exact formation. The overwhelming display of force usually ended conflicts before they began. Most species took one look at his armada and immediately transmitted their surrender. Those few foolish enough to resist rarely lasted more than a few hours. His communication officer, a tall insectoid creature with 4 arms, approached with measured steps. "Commander, the human leadership has received our ultimatum. They have been given 1 standard galactic hour to respond. The ultimatum was simple and absolute. Submit to Corvathian rule, allow their planet to be strip-mined for resources, and watch their population be relocated to labor colonies across the Empire. Refuse, and witness their world turn to ash and floating debris." Veltanos had delivered this same message to hundreds of worlds. The response was always the same: desperate pleas for mercy, offers of tribute, or immediate capitulation. Sometimes, the conquered species even thanked the Empire for allowing them to live as slaves rather than dying as free beings. Down on Earth, alarms blared through the Seoul Defense Command Center, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Admiral Lee Jinho stood before a holographic display that showed their situation in stark, terrifying detail. Red dots representing enemy ships filled the 3-dimensional map like drops of blood in water. Captain Park Minji, his senior tactical officer, pulled up energy readings from their long-range sensors. "Sir, each of those ships is outputting power levels we've never seen before. Their smallest vessels are reading as more powerful than our entire Pacific Fleet combined." Commander Kim Do-hyun, head of intelligence, added grimly, "Our analysis suggests they could sterilize the entire planet's surface in under 6 hours, maybe less." Around the command center, dozens of officers and technicians worked frantically at their stations. Communication arrays crackled with reports from military installations across Earth. The Lunar Base commander reported that enemy scout ships were already scanning their defensive positions. Mars Colony transmitted that strange energy readings were disrupting their equipment from millions of kilometers away. Jinho studied the alien message that had been translated by their best xenolinguists. The words were polite, but their meaning was crystal clear: become slaves or die. There were no other options offered, no room for negotiation, no possibility of compromise. Captain Park approached with a datapad containing Earth's military assessment. "Admiral, our combined fleet strength is approximately 8,000 vessels. Most are patrol ships and frigates. We have maybe 200 ships that could be considered true warships by their standards." The numbers were devastating. Humanity's entire military force was outnumbered 6 to 1, and that didn't account for the massive technological gap. Earth's most advanced battleship would barely qualify as a patrol craft compared to what floated in space above them. Commander Kim pulled up intelligence reports on the Corvathian Empire. "Sir, our deep space monitoring stations have been tracking their expansion for decades. They've absorbed every civilization they've encountered. The Zentari put up a fight for 3 months before surrendering. The Macron lasted 2 weeks. Most species surrender within days." The command center fell silent as officers processed the implications. They were facing an enemy that had perfected the art of conquest through overwhelming force. An empire that had never known defeat. A military machine that had crushed every form of resistance it had ever encountered. Jinho activated the communication array that would broadcast his response across the solar system and beyond. Every human settlement, every ship, every person would hear his words. More importantly, the aliens waiting for his answer would hear them too. His voice was steady and calm as he spoke into the microphone. "This is Admiral Lee Jinho of the Seoul Defense Force, representing the people of Earth and all human colonies. We have received your ultimatum and considered your terms." In space above, Commander Veltanos leaned forward in his command chair. Finally, these humans would show the wisdom that had kept other species alive. "We respectfully decline your offer." The alien bridge fell completely silent. Officers stopped their work to stare at their commander. Communication arrays across 50,000 ships carried the human response to every crew member in the fleet. Veltanos felt his blood temperature drop. In 3 centuries of conquest, spanning dozens of star systems and hundreds of worlds, no species had ever refused the Empire's ultimatum. Not when faced with such impossible odds. War was now inevitable. The first Corvathian plasma beams lit up space like deadly fireworks. Commander Veltanos watched from his flagship as dozens of his heavy cruisers opened fire on Earth's orbital defense platforms. The ancient alien had seen this same scene play out countless times across the galaxy. Superior firepower meeting inferior technology. The outcome was always predictable. The massive energy beams struck their targets with surgical precision. Earth's largest orbital station, housing nearly 10,000 personnel, simply vanished in a ball of superheated gas. 2 more platforms followed within seconds, their twisted metal remains spinning away into the void. Veltanos expected the human fleet to retreat to safer positions, perhaps attempt to negotiate, or at least regroup for a defensive stance. Instead, something happened that made his scaled skin crawl with unease. The humans attacked. Captain Cho Hunwoo commanded the frigate Seoul's Pride, a vessel barely 200 meters long facing Corvathian battlecruisers that stretched over 3 kilometers. His ship had already taken heavy damage from the opening barrage. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space, while emergency lights flickered across the bridge. His tactical officer reported critical system failures. "Captain, we've lost main engines and weapons are at 30% power. Hull integrity is failing on decks 4 through 7. Any reasonable commander would order an immediate retreat." The Seoul's Pride was clearly outmatched and dying. Standard military doctrine called for withdrawal to fight another day. Instead, Cho activated the ship's emergency boosters and aimed directly at the nearest Corvathian battlecruiser. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed. Today we show these aliens what humans do when cornered." The frigate's remaining engines blazed to life, pushing the damaged vessel forward at maximum acceleration. Corvathian gunners, confused by this suicidal charge, hesitated for precious seconds before opening fire. Their plasma beams tore through the frigate's hull, but momentum carried the Seoul's Pride forward. Cho's ship struck the battlecruiser's reactor section like a meteor. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a brief new star that outshone the sun for several seconds. When the light faded, both vessels were gone, along with their crews. Veltanos stared at the empty space where his battlecruiser had been. In 300 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. The humans had deliberately destroyed their own ship to take out a vessel 10 times its size. It made no tactical sense. The alien commander's confusion deepened when similar attacks began happening across the battlefield. Lieutenant Commander Yoon Nari led a squadron of 12 human fighters against a formation of Corvathian destroyers. Her tiny ships, each no bigger than atmospheric aircraft, charged straight at the massive alien vessels. The Corvathian point defense systems activated, filling space with deadly energy beams designed to swat aside small craft. Yoon's squadron flew directly into this killing field, seemingly on a suicidal mission that would accomplish nothing but their own destruction. At the last possible moment, the human fighters scattered in 12 different directions. The Corvathian gunners, programmed to track formations rather than individual targets, lost their firing solutions for critical seconds. In that brief window, Yoon's pilot struck exposed sensor arrays, weapon mounts, and engine clusters with precision that seemed impossible for such primitive technology. 3 Corvathian destroyers suddenly found themselves blind and crippled, spinning helplessly as their control systems failed. The human fighters had sacrificed tactical advantage for surgical strikes against weak points that standard military doctrine said were impossible to target during combat. Down on Earth's surface, Colonel Yong Sunho crouched in a bunker, hidden beneath the Australian outback. His command center looked nothing like the high-tech facilities aboard the spaceships above. Rough concrete walls, exposed cables and equipment that seemed held together with determination rather than proper engineering. Sunho watched his tactical display as Corvathian landing craft descended toward major population centers. The aliens expected organized resistance from military bases and government installations. They had planned for conventional warfare between uniformed armies fighting over strategic objectives. Instead, Sunho activated a network of hidden missile sites scattered across seemingly random locations. An abandoned farm in Kansas launched surface-to-air missiles at passing alien ships. A disguised facility beneath a shopping mall in Tokyo sent electromagnetic pulses that disrupted enemy communications. Hidden launchers in the Amazon rainforest fired guided rockets that struck Corvathian vessels from directions their sensors never expected. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Every hill could hide a missile battery. Every building might contain armed resistance fighters. Every civilian area was potentially a military target that fired back. Corvathian ground forces, trained for conventional planetary assaults, discovered that humans had turned their entire world into a weapon. Supply depots exploded from bombs planted by maintenance workers. Transport vehicles broke down from sabotage by mechanics who smiled and offered to help repair them. Even children threw rocks with enough accuracy to damage sensitive equipment. Back in space, Veltanos received casualty reports that made his ancient blood run cold. In the first hour of combat, his supposedly invincible fleet had lost over 200 ships, not to superior firepower or advanced technology, but to tactics that seemed to come from a species that had never heard the word surrender. His tactical officer, a cautious creature with compound eyes, nervously approached the command chair. "Commander, the humans are using strategies our combat computers cannot predict. They sacrifice valuable assets for minimal tactical gains. They attack when they should retreat. They fight as if victory and defeat mean nothing to them." Veltanos studied the battlefield displays with growing unease. Every military academy in the Corvathian Empire taught the same fundamental principle. Rational beings would always choose survival over destruction when faced with impossible odds. It was the foundation of their entire conquest strategy, but these humans were fighting as if death was preferable to surrender, as if mutual destruction was an acceptable outcome, as if they genuinely believed they could win against odds that any computer would calculate as absolutely hopeless. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Veltanos felt something he had not experienced since his youth, the cold touch of uncertainty creeping up his spine. Commander Veltanos paced the length of his flagship's intelligence chamber, his clawed feet clicking against the polished metal floor. Around him, dozens of his most skilled analysts worked frantically at holographic displays, trying to decode the mystery of human warfare. The casualties from the first day of battle had shaken the entire Corvathian command structure. His chief, intelligence officer, a pale creature with tentacles instead of arms, approached carrying a data crystal that glowed with an ominous red light. "Commander, we have completed our analysis of the captured human military databases. What we discovered changes everything." The data crystal projected a three-dimensional timeline of human history above the conference table. Veltanos watched, in growing horror, as the display revealed thousands of years of continuous warfare, not the occasional territorial disputes or resource conflicts that plagued most species, but constant, unending battle against everything around them. Major Han Seojun's personal files, recovered from a damaged human cruiser, contained tactical manuals that read like poetry written in blood. His combat doctrine spoke of something called asymmetric warfare, the art of turning weakness into strength, of making the enemy's advantages become their vulnerabilities. The files detailed human conflicts that defied all logic. Small groups of fighters holding mountain passes against armies 100 times their size. outnumbered defenders choosing to fight to the last person rather than surrender fortified positions. Cities that burned themselves to the ground rather than submit to occupation. One document particularly disturbed Veltanos. It described a human concept called Pyrrhic victory, winning a battle at such tremendous cost that the victory became meaningless. Most species would consider this a failure of leadership. Humans celebrated it as a tactical option. Captain Im Yuna's psychological evaluation, found in the wreckage of a human medical frigate, painted an even more terrifying picture. The report detailed how human children were raised from birth with stories of heroes who died fighting impossible odds. Their entertainment celebrated warriors who chose death over dishonor. Their religions promised rewards for those who sacrificed themselves for others. The evaluation noted that humans taught their young to view surrender as the ultimate failure. Worse than death, worse than torture, worse than watching their loved ones suffer. They were programmed from childhood to see hopeless situations not as reasons to give up, but as opportunities to prove their worth. Veltanos read passages from human literature that made his reptilian blood freeze. Stories of soldiers who continued fighting after losing limbs, tales of civilians who chose to die in burning buildings rather than be captured. Poems that celebrated last stands where everyone died, but none yielded. The most disturbing revelation came from Commander Bayek Somin's interrogation transcripts. The human commander had been captured during a boarding action on her crippled destroyer. Under questioning, she revealed truths that shattered Corvathian assumptions about civilized warfare. Every human is a soldier, she had told her captors with quiet pride. Our farmers know how to make explosives from fertilizer. Our teachers understand battlefield medicine. Our children learn to shoot before they learn to read. We don't have civilians. We have people who haven't been asked to fight yet. The interrogation revealed that human society was built around a concept they called total war. Not just their military, but their entire civilization was designed to continue fighting even after formal defeat. Their factories could be converted to weapons production within days. Their schools taught chemistry that could be used to make bombs. Their hospitals were designed to treat combat casualties. Veltanos discovered that humans had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting for survival. Not just against other humans, but against diseases that killed millions, natural disasters that destroyed entire regions, and environmental changes that would have wiped out weaker species. They had a phrase that appeared repeatedly in their military manuals: adapt, improvise, overcome. It wasn't just a slogan, it was their fundamental approach to existence. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't calculate surrender. They calculated how to turn those odds into weapons. The intelligence reports revealed that humans had fought wars in every possible environment: underground tunnels, frozen wastelands, burning deserts, the depths of oceans, the vacuum of space. They had learned to kill with rocks, sticks, chemicals, radiation, and pure determination. One file documented something called guerrilla warfare, the art of making occupation impossible through constant invisible resistance. Humans had perfected techniques for fighting from within their own captured territory, turning every building into a fortress and every citizen into a potential saboteur. Another report detailed human berserker psychology, a combat state where individuals became so focused on destroying the enemy that they ignored their own injuries, pain, and certain death. Corvathian psychologists couldn't understand how an entire species could access this level of combat fury. The most chilling discovery was in their technological development. Every human invention, no matter how peaceful its original purpose, had been weaponized. Medical knowledge became biological warfare. Agricultural science became chemical weapons. Space exploration became orbital bombardment platforms. Veltanos realized with growing dread that his empire had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had assumed humans were like every other species they had conquered, rational beings who would choose survival over principle when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, they had attacked a species that viewed extinction as preferable to slavery, a civilization that had turned desperation into an art form. A people who measured victory not by survival, but by how much damage they could inflict while dying. As the intelligence reports continued to pile up, one truth became undeniably clear. The Corvathian Empire wasn't fighting an army or even a nation. They were fighting an entire species that had weaponized their own willingness to die. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Commander Veltanos began to wonder if his empire had bitten off more than it could swallow. The humans weren't just refusing to surrender, they were treating mutual destruction as a viable military strategy. The empire had made a terrible mistake. 3 weeks into the war, the Corvathian Empire's technological superiority finally began to show its devastating power. Commander Veltanos watched from his flagship as orbital bombardment platforms reduced human cities to smoking craters. New York, Tokyo, London, each metropolis vanished in columns of superheated plasma that could be seen from orbit. The numbers were staggering. 50 million humans had died in the first week alone. Their organized fleet lay scattered across the solar system, broken ships drifting like metal tombstones in the void. Earth's orbital defenses were completely destroyed. By every military calculation in the Corvathian database, the war should have been over, yet somehow, the human resistance was growing stronger. Admiral Lee Jinho crouched in a command bunker, carved deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid, in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. The facility had once been a simple mining operation, but human engineers had transformed it into a military fortress within days. Power cables snaked along rough-hewn walls, connecting communication arrays to jury-rigged weapon systems. Around him, the survivors of humanity's shattered fleet worked with desperate efficiency. Commander Oh Tai-hyung, whose destroyer had been crippled in the battle for Luna, now coordinated supply runs using modified cargo haulers. Captain Lim Chae-yung, formerly of the battleship Incheon, led strike teams that turned civilian mining ships into guided missiles. The transformation was remarkable and terrifying. Ore extractors became mass drivers, capable of hurling tungsten projectiles at near-light speed. Industrial fabricators churned out improvised weapons and ammunition. Even the asteroid's life support systems had been weaponized. The air recyclers could now produce toxic gases for use against boarding parties. Jinho studied the tactical displays that showed the grim reality of their situation. Every major human military installation was either destroyed or under siege. The orbital shipyards were gone. Most of Earth's population centers lay in ruins. By conventional military standards, humanity had already lost. But humans didn't fight by conventional standards. "Admiral, we're receiving transmission from the Pacific Resistance Cell," reported Lieutenant Park Sunho, his communications officer. The young man's uniform was patched and stained, but his voice remained steady. "They've successfully converted the Yokohama Industrial Complex into a weapons factory. Daily output is now 3,000 missiles and 50,000 rounds of ammunition." Similar reports flooded in from across the solar system. On Mars, Colonel Yang Minho had organized the terraforming colonies into a network of underground bunkers connected by mining tunnels. The Red Planet had become a fortress world, where every dome and habitat module could continue fighting, even if all the others fell. The Jupiter mining stations, led by Commander Seo Jinwoo, had turned their massive fusion reactors into planet-killing bombs. They couldn't move the weapons, but any Corvathian fleet that approached the gas giant would face the threat of nuclear explosions visible from Earth. Even more disturbing to Veltanos were the intercepted communications from Earth itself. He had expected desperate pleas for mercy, offers of surrender, or at least discussions about minimizing casualties. Instead, he heard something that chilled his alien blood. "This is Lieutenant Colonel Nam Ji-won, speaking from Production Center. 7, came a transmission from what had once been Seoul. "We've successfully converted the remaining automotive factories to military production. Current output is 200 armored vehicles per day, plus small arms and ammunition. Expected operational lifespan under bombardment is 6 months. The transmission continued with casual efficiency, as if discussing weather rather than preparing for extended warfare in a devastated city. "Civilian evacuation to the mountain bunkers is proceeding on schedule. Children under 10 have been relocated to the deep shelters with full educational materials. They'll continue their studies until called to active duty. Veltanos felt his stomach turn. The humans were planning for their children to continue fighting a war that their parents might not survive. They were treating generational conflict as a normal part of military planning. Another intercepted message came from Dr. Shin Min-seo, formerly the head of Seoul National Hospital. Medical Station Alpha 7 reporting, "We've treated 800 wounded fighters in the past week. Mortality rate is down to 12% thanks to combat medicine protocols. All medical staff have completed basic weapons training and are prepared for combat duties if needed." The doctor's voice was calm and professional as she continued. "We've established field hospitals in 17 locations across the city ruins. Each facility is designed to continue operations even under direct bombardment. Medical supplies are expected to last 18 months at current consumption rates." The Corvathian intelligence analysis painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Humans weren't just fighting with their military. They had converted their entire civilization into a war machine. Teachers had become weapons instructors. Engineers designed fortifications instead of buildings. Even their entertainment industry produced propaganda that encouraged continued resistance. Veltanos discovered that human children as young as 8 were being taught to identify Corvathian weak points, memorize sabotage techniques, and plan guerrilla operations. Their schools had become training camps. Their playgrounds had become obstacle courses. The most horrifying revelation came from a transmission between human resistance leaders discussing long-term strategy. Captain Kim Yoon-hee, coordinating operations from the ruins of Los Angeles, spoke. "With cold calculation about fighting for decades, the occupation forces will need to maintain control over approximately 3 billion surviving humans scattered across hundreds of settlements," she reported to Admiral Jinho. "Historical analysis suggests they'll need at least 1 soldier for every 10 civilians to prevent insurgency. That's 300 million occupation troops just for Earth." Her analysis continued with mathematical precision. Add the costs of maintaining supply lines across interstellar distances, defending against constant sabotage, and replacing equipment destroyed by resistance actions. Conservative estimates suggest the occupation will cost them more resources per year than our entire planet is worth. The human strategy was becoming clear to Veltanos. They couldn't win through superior firepower or advanced technology. Instead, they planned to make conquest so expensive and painful that the Corvathian Empire would eventually choose to leave rather than continue paying the price. Commander Ryu Jae-hyun's transmission from the Australian underground complexes confirmed this approach. "We've established 47 independent resistance cells across the continent. Each cell can operate for years without outside support. Even if they eliminate 90% of our forces, the survivors can continue the fight indefinitely." As weeks turned to months, the Corvathian casualty reports painted a grim picture. Their occupation forces faced constant attacks from invisible enemies. Supply convoys were destroyed by improvised explosives. Communication arrays were sabotaged by maintenance workers who smiled while planting bombs. Even alien-controlled human collaborators were systematically eliminated by their own people. Veltanos realized with growing horror that his empire faced an impossible choice. Complete genocide would require hunting down and killing every human in the solar system, a task that would take decades and consume vast military resources. But anything short of total extermination would leave survivors who would continue fighting for generations. The humans had turned their own destruction into a weapon. Every civilian casualty created new fighters. Every destroyed city became a symbol of resistance. Every small victory by Corvathian forces only strengthened human determination to continue the war. For the first time in his military career, Commander Veltanos understood that his empire had encountered something it couldn't conquer, a species that preferred mutual destruction to peaceful surrender. 6 months after the first shots were fired, Admiral Lee Jinho stood on the bridge of humanity's last operational battleship, the Sole Defender. Through the cracked view screen, he could see Earth burning below. Entire continents glowed red with fires that had been burning since the orbital bombardments began. The planet that had given birth to humanity was dying, and there was nothing left to save. Around him, the remnants of the human fleet prepared for what everyone knew would be their final battle. 37 ships of various sizes faced off against Commander Veltanos' armada of over 8,000 Corvathian vessels. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity's last stand would last maybe 20 minutes, but Jinho wasn't thinking about winning anymore. He was thinking about making the victory cost everything. "Admiral, we're receiving final reports from the scattered resistance cells," announced Lieutenant Park Sun-ho, his voice steady despite the hopeless odds. "All ships report ready for Operation Last Dance." Operation Last Dance was humanity's final card, a coordinated suicide attack designed to inflict maximum casualties on the Corvathian fleet. Every remaining human vessel had been converted into a guided missile, their reactors rigged to explode with nuclear fury when they impacted enemy ships. Jinho activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Jinho. Today we write the final chapter of humanity's story. We may not live to see tomorrow, but we'll make sure the galaxy remembers what happens when someone tries to chain the human spirit." The Soul Defenders. Engines roared to life, pushing the battleship toward the massive Corvathian formation. Around him, the surviving human fleet followed, each captain knowing they were flying toward certain death. But as the final battle began, something unexpected happened. Commander Veltanos' flagship shuddered under impacts that didn't come from the human fleet in front of him. Explosions blossomed across his vessel's hull from weapons firing from impossible angles. "Commander!" his tactical officer screamed. In panic, "We're under attack from ships behind our formation. Unknown vessels are targeting our rear guard." Veltanos spun toward his tactical display and felt his blood freeze. Dozens of small craft were tearing through his rear formations, using hit-and-run tactics that he recognized all too well. Human fighters, somehow appearing in space that should have been completely controlled by Corvathian forces. Emergency communications flooded in from across the Empire. On Corvathia Prime, the capital world itself, Captain Song Mina led a strike team of human survivors who had somehow crossed 3 star systems undetected. Her small group had infiltrated the planet's industrial sector and destroyed 3 massive manufacturing complexes that produced weapons for the Imperial fleet. The report was impossible to believe. "How did humans reach our homeworld?" Veltanos demanded of his intelligence officer. "Our space is completely secured." The answer came from Major Kang Jiwan's guerrilla unit operating on the agricultural world of Zephyr 7. Intercepted communications revealed that human survivors from the early battles had hidden aboard damaged Corvathian vessels, playing dead among the debris. When those ships returned to Imperial space for repairs, the humans had awakened and begun a campaign of sabotage that was spreading across multiple star systems. On Nexus Station, the Empire's primary communications hub, a team led by Commander Bei Seung-ho had taken over the central broadcasting array. Instead of military communications, the station now transmitted human music, poetry, and messages of defiance across the entire Corvathian communications network. The reports kept coming, each one more devastating than the last. Human survivors had turned Imperial supply depots into bombing targets. They had poisoned water supplies on colony worlds. They had even convinced some alien species to join their resistance movement by demonstrating that the supposedly invincible Empire could be hurt. As his flagship's hull buckled under continued assault, Veltanos received a direct transmission from Admiral Jinho. The human's face appeared on the main screen, showing a man who looked like he hadn't slept in months, but whose eyes still burned with unbreakable determination. "Commander Veltanos," Jinho said with calm formality, "I thought you should understand what you're really fighting before this ends. We learned something long ago that your empire apparently never did. Victory isn't about winning every battle. It's about making conquest cost more than withdrawal." Jinho's words were accompanied by tactical displays showing the true scope of human operations. While the Empire had been focused on destroying Earth, human survivors had spread across dozens of star systems like a virus, turning Imperial territories into war zones. "You can kill every human on Earth," Jinho continued, "but you'll spend the next century hunting down survivors who will never stop fighting." Every world you control will need constant military protection. Every supply convoy will face attack. Every colonial settlement will live in fear of human sabotage. The Admiral's image flickered as his ship took damage, but his voice remained steady. Your choice is simple, Commander. Commit your entire empire to hunting down every last human in the galaxy, or withdraw and let us die on our own terms. Veltanos looked at the strategic display showing his empire under attack from within. Human resistance cells were operating on over 40 imperial worlds. Colonial governments were requesting military assistance to deal with sabotage campaigns. Trade routes were being disrupted by guerrilla attacks that seemed to come from nowhere. The economic reports were even more devastating. The cost of occupying human territory, hunting down survivors, and defending against constant insurgency was draining the Empire's resources faster than conquest could replenish them. Victory was becoming more expensive than defeat. Through the smoke and chaos of battle, Veltanos watched Earth's surface where his sensors detected something that made his alien heart sink. Even as the planet burned, radio transmissions continued from hidden bunkers deep underground. Human voices still coordinated resistance activities, still planned sabotage operations, still refused to surrender. Attention all resistance cells, came one transmission from somewhere beneath the ruins of Tokyo. Imperial forces are concentrated in the northern sectors, execute secondary objectives, and maintain communications protocols. The fight continues. Another voice from the Australian underground complexes added, educational protocols remain in effect. All children over age 10 report for advanced tactical training. This war doesn't end with us. Veltanos realized with growing horror that even complete destruction of Earth's surface wouldn't end the human threat. The survivors would continue fighting from generation to generation, passing down their resistance knowledge like a sacred tradition. The final truth hit him like a physical blow. The Corvathian Empire hadn't attacked a civilization, they had attacked a concept. The idea that freedom was worth any price, that death was preferable to slavery, that no force in the universe could truly conquer a species that refused to be conquered. As Admiral Jinho's ship exploded in a brilliant fireball that took 3 Corvathian destroyers with it, Veltanos made the decision that would change galactic history. He ordered the Imperial fleet to withdraw from human space. Within days, the Galactic Council established a new law that would stand for centuries. Avoid contact with the species known as humans. They consider mutual assured destruction to be a viable negotiating tactic. The Corvathian Empire had learned what every successful predator eventually discovers. Some prey isn't worth the price of hunting. Humanity had won by proving they could never truly be conquered, even by death itself. The Nihu and